That's your environmental side, right?
Good afternoon.
My
My name is Cindy Arnson. I'm the director of the Latin American program here at the Wilson Center. And on behalf of the Latin American program and my colleagues Peter Hakem of the Inter-American Dialogue, Ted Picone of the Brookings Institution, and Peter DeShazo of the Center for Strategic and International Studies, I'm delighted to welcome you to this conversation with Secretary General of the OAS, José Miguel Insulza. Today's discussion takes place less than 2 months after Dr. Insulza's re-election as Secretary General of the OAS, a post he has held since 2005. As all of us who read the newspapers know, his candidacy and his running for a second term was accompanied by unprecedented controversy over the efficacy of the Organization of American States as an institution and over his own personal leadership in particular. Critics faulted the OAS for not acting quickly or forcefully enough in addressing threats to democracy, and for not exercising sufficient and transparent oversight of its own budget. The OAS has been called by others a tool of U.S. foreign policy. Some in the United States question its efficacy. Many have pinned the faults of the organization on the leadership of Secretary General Insulza himself. For others in the region and in Washington, Insulza is an experienced and respected diplomat. He's an effective leader who has attempted to chart a new course for an institution founded in the heyday of the Cold War and based on concepts of the 19th century. I count myself among those who admire José Miguel Insulza, and I'm indeed very, very pleased to invite him back to the Woodrow Wilson Center. He has a distinguished record of public service in his native country, Chile. He has served as a minister under several governments since the 1990 transition to democracy. He was active in the citizen effort to hold a plebiscite on the continuation of military rule in the late 1980s. He's also an accomplished scholar who, during his years in exile in Mexico, amassed a formidable reputation as a scholar and as an activist for the return to democracy in his own country. I'm pleased to welcome José Miguel Insulza to this discussion, and I'll say a brief word about the format. He will speak, and then the other three co-sponsors of the event today will ask an opening question. Following that, we will turn to the audience and invite your comments and participation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for being here. And this is about the activities and the effectiveness of the Organization of American States, and I will refer to that. Before doing so, I would just like to address very briefly something Cindy also addressed very briefly, the management and the budget of the OAS, and how it's handled the budget, etc. And I will read a report. I will read a couple of sentences of a report just issued by the Board of Auditors of the Organization of American States, chaired by the auditor of the U.S. Department of State and the other members of Canada and Bahamas, if I'm not wrong. The board was pleased that the OAS has made considerable efforts to seek administrative efficiencies and savings. We saw good management initiatives and cost avoidance measures, but not really substantive savings. Through the meetings we held, the board believes the OAS administrative management recognizes the magnitude of the problem. The OAS continues to face a difficult situation, which grows progressively worse as the demands for its programs and activities exceed its resources. Based on the continuation of the depressed world economy, the OAS faces a challenge. The summary of this goes on to say that what the Secretariat needs, in addition to common sense of austerity, are policy decisions from the member states on what priorities should and should not be financed. Without this management austerity, and without this, management austerity and efficiency efforts are useful, but not significant in the absence of real policy decisions on priorities. Well, this is what we have been saying all along these years. I mean, we do too many things with the small contributions that the countries pay. I said the other day, I don't know if this is exactly true, but it's approximately true, that the budget of the OAS in total, I'm talking about the ordinary budget, must be about 1% of the UN budget in total, ordinary budget, not talking about voluntary contributions on either organization. Of course, if we count the voluntary contributions, the $6 billion of the DPKO, the Department of Peacekeeping Operations, would be enough to pay about I don't know, about 4 or 5 decades, 5 or 6 decades of the OAS budget. So the problem is not is basically not that we don't fulfill the mandates, or that we don't do what the OAS is supposed to do, but rather that the OAS is doing probably too many things. And I will refer to one of them, but I will refer to the main issues here. The OAS can be defined as the only forum for political dialogue that includes all the independent nations of the hemisphere. According to our charter, the OAS excludes no one. And all the demands is that every country accepts the same rules of the game, freely agreed by the organization itself. Every country, every independent country of the Americas, all 35 of them, there are only 35, is a member of the OAS. As we know, 2 of those countries are not acting now, which are Cuba and Honduras. We do hope to have Honduras back soon. We don't hope to have, we're not foreseeing return of Cuba in the very near future to the OAS. Now, the OAS has several levels, as you know, of action: the Summit of the Americas, the General Assembly, the ministerial meetings. But it has so many programs that it will be really hard to name them. First, what are, I would say, the most known things about the OAS? The Inter-American System of Human rights belongs to it. When there's a human rights problem, everybody asks for the action of the OAS. When the Commission of Human Rights acts, everybody seems to forget that the Commission of Human Rights is the main body of the OAS for the defense of human rights. Second, the elections. We have, for the first time in history, elections in all the member countries of the OAS. Regular elections, clean elections, participative elections, and I would say with secret ballot, and I would say in general accepted results. That has never happened in the 200 years of independent history of the region. It's happening now, and not recently, because in spite of Honduras first, of Haiti at the end of the past century, or the past decade, it's actually at the beginning of the decade. Excuse me. It's actually, those are actually exceptions. We are the second democratic continent in the world. Only in spite of all the talk about democracy, the US, the OAS, the Americas are the other continent, the other independent, democratic continent, besides Europe. And that's something that had never happened before. So I think that this is a big achievement, and we are very much participants of it. We have had, in the past 5 years, when I was Secretary General, 47 electoral processes. Of course, this includes some processes that are not properly electoral, such as referendums for constitutions, referendums to approve changes to the constitution, etc. But also not only presidential elections, but also national congressional elections, local elections, even primary elections. And everybody agrees that the OAS seal of an election is a guarantee that the election has been a clean one. Then we have our programs of democratic governance, our program on civil registers, our programs of access to justice, our cooperation with the member states, e-government programs, local government, and very, very important, the following of the Inter-American Convention Against Corruption. We are the ones that are responsible for it. By the way, before the assembly in Lima, we are having a convention of member parties of the Convention Against Corruption to discuss the progress of this convention. We have our program. I would say it's difficult to talk about a program of management of crisis. Of course, everybody talks about Honduras. We can't talk about Honduras. We should also talk about Nicaragua, 2005. We should also talk about Bolivia from 2006 to 2009 and 10, I would say. We should talk about Guatemala last year. We should talk about Ecuador twice during these years. We should talk about Belize and Guatemala. We should talk about the Colombian mission of peace, a map that to do with the verification of the disarmament of the paramilitary. We should talk about Colombia and Ecuador, and we should talk about Haiti. Those are all successes of the OAS in this past half a decade, and they were all most of them in application of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, and a couple of them in application of the Charter of the OAS itself. In terms of course, we also have our social programs. And just to mention one, we have given in the past 5 years 4,363 students of the Americas and the Caribbean scholarships for professional, technical, or vocational studies. Then we have security, not the old security concept of I would say defense, common defense. Fortunately, this is a continent that has had no wars in the past 90 years. But it is basically a concept that includes other problems of security, among which of course, drug traffic, anti-terrorism, crime, common crime, organized crime, juvenile gangs, etc. And of course, also issues having to do with natural events or natural catastrophes. So I would like to say, just to summarize, I would like to say that the OAS is much more than usually newspaper talks about. I shouldn't say newspapers probably in this country, but Cynthia referred very much to the big debate in the newspapers about the election. I still have to see another newspaper except the Miami Herald who informed the public of the result of the election. Everybody informed of the big problem of the election. There was no problem. The day of the election, there didn't seem to be any problem, actually, except some countries who wanted to have their say. But the result of the election was not reported in the Washington Post. Actually, the Washington Post has not said a word, has not uttered one word about the Organization of American States since before the election. So I would say that in general, the OAS, as most of the region, I mean, Mexico is only violence, and Colombia is only drugs, and other places are only crime, and some countries are only soccer. But there's no real coverage of Latin America in the region, or Latin America and the Caribbean. And the OAS is not a difference. But that does not mean that the OAS, one of the big strengths of the OAS today, is its activity and its recognition across the region. This discussion would have not taken place, by the way. Before, elections at the OAS were practically confidential. The big discussion about even the past election, let me say that the past election, in which, as you may remember, we had 5 ties, there was not a big discussion about the OAS. And however, this time there was a discussion because the OAS matters. And that's not a simple thing to say, when you have the UNASUR and the other regional organizations and the meeting of Cancun and several others, in the 80s, we had first the Contadora group, and then we had the Rio group, and that seemed to be the real places where Latin America was going to discuss its problems. The OAS is much relevant. It's curious that when everybody talks about the so many initiatives that seem to appear in Latin America, the OAS is today more relevant than ever. Of course, we have some shortcomings. We are probably too regional, too looking inwards, which means that we don't discuss, or nobody discusses, global problems at the OAS. As I said it the other day, when the U.S. wants to talk to has global problems to discuss, it goes to the ASEAN to discuss them, goes to the European Union or to NATO to discuss them. Usually it doesn't come to the OAS to discuss them. The OAS is only, I mean, when I've given a couple of statements about the Middle East crisis or Afghanistan or some other place, everybody seems to wonder what's he saying, why is he talking about this? These guys are only supposed to talk about the regional matters. That's a problem. Latin America and the Caribbean want a role in the world, and the moment they're not being given that role in the world, that also affects the relevancy of the organization. On the other, I will also say that one big weakness today, one big problem today, is that for some reason this region, Latin America, I'm talking about Latin America and the Caribbean, which I have said many times said, it's not the poorest region of the world. On the contrary, it's Latin America and the Caribbean are at the level of, I would say, give or take a few $100 in the average per capita income of the world. They don't fit the old description of the third world, but certainly they still don't fit the new description, the description of the first world. And for that reason, perhaps, when people look at North-South relations, or which we look at global problems, the region is not there. And that also affects the functioning of an organization which is essentially diverse. Here we have the largest power in the world, the country with the third largest population in the world, four of the 10 largest countries of the world geographically. I mean, Canada, the U.S., Brazil, and Argentina are among the 10 largest countries of the world, and at the same time, some of the tiniest. We're diverse from an economic, from a demographic, from a geographical, from a political, and from a political every time less, and from a cultural point of view. So this diverse organization really needs to get along and to get immersed in the world. And when we try to decree that it should be homogeneous, we probably miss a lot of sense of the richness of the organization. But we have some strengths. I have already pointed out some of them. One is that we are the oldest political organization in the world. I mean, we celebrated the other day the centennial of our building. But let me say that this is a true centennial. I would say that, the OAS was really founded in 1948, but it's a successor to another organization which was the Pan American Union. And the Pan American Union was created as a secretariat in 1910. Of course, the world has changed a lot, and so have the Americas. In one of the walls of the OAS, there's an inscription with the decree or the act that created the OAS, and it says in, I don't know what date, to 1910. We create the Pan American Union, the Secretariat of the Pan American Union in Washington, D.C., chaired ex aequo by the Secretary of State of the United States, and formed also integrated by the other delegates of the Latin American countries which are here in the U.S. That has changed a lot. Latin America is not to be taken for granted anymore. The Caribbean is not to be taken for granted. It's a difficult organization, and probably that's the reason why we should make it more relevant. But its strength is that it includes everybody. It's an old organization. All the laws, all the international law of the America is at the OAS. When there's a conflict in the U.S., in the OAS, everybody comes here. I mean, when there's a conference in the Americas, when Ecuador and Colombia had this problem a few years ago, they came to the OAS. When Bolivia, which I wouldn't say is a difficult, I wouldn't say it's a very pro-U.S. government, had some problems with their democracy, they came 3 times to the OAS on the grounds of the Inter-American Democratic Charter. When the Nicaraguan government was being deposed in 2005, they came to the OAS. When Paraguay has needed help in recent months, they have come to the OAS. So countries in the Americas resort to the OAS. I would say that, and conclude by saying that probably this soul searching about the OAS is very proper from this country. The other countries, of course, also want other things. They want to have their own integration organizations. They want to have dialogue among the Latin Americans without anybody else interfering. They want to have their local or regional organisms, but they know exactly very well what the OAS stands for, and that's why we keep our membership intact in spite of all these problems. About the future, well, our main challenge for the future is to remain relevant, and for that we have a very difficult balance act to make, activity to carry out. The Charter of the OAS says that every country in the Americas is a member of the Organization of American States. It also says, by the way, that every country has the right to choose the system of government that they want. But then we have the Inter-American Democratic Charter, which changed that to a certain point and said that every country of the Americas has a right to democracy. The peoples of the Americas have a right to democracy, and it's the duty of the governments to give them democracy. How do we balance self-determination and non-intervention with the democratic principle and our desire to promote democracy collectively? That is a big issue. My impression is that is done more by dialogue, by negotiation, by discussion, by cooperation than by force or by coercion. We don't have coercion mechanisms. When many people come to us and says, you should apply the democratic charter to this country, I say, how do you apply the charter to a country? When there's a problem, you can send a mission if they are willing to accept it. Article 20, if I'm not wrong. When there is a problem, already in action, there's already something is happening, they have to request for a mission. And only when democracy breaks down, that's when you have the possibility of promoting action from here and not from the countries themselves, because there shouldn't be any government at that moment. So our tools are very, and they were put that way, I think, because of the problem of congruence between non-intervention and democracy. But we still are bound. Have to keep those two principles together, and the best way to do that is keep and engage. Engage, talk with the countries, not exclude countries, not fight against countries. We have to work with them through dialogue and super persistent capacity to improve the quality of democracy in a peaceful way. But then, of course, democracy, that's a basic challenge. The OAS is all about democracy. Then, of course, democracy has other threats. Not only the ideological threats, which I admit do exist. And I was just mentioned two. In spite of the fact that we are not a poor continent, we continue to be the most unequal continent in the world, and we have too many poor. And when you have too many poor, you have democratic rule, you have in general freedom of expression, and people are looking at the way others live, you have an unstable democracy, which is prone to conflict and prone to difficulties and prone to populism and prone to Caesarism, as much as people are trying to solve their problems and find that democracy does not deliver. I remember my first General Assembly when I joined the OAS, we had in Fort Lauderdale, John Maestro here. I don't know if he invented the slogan, but it was a good one. It was the slogan was delivering the benefits of democracy. That's one of our biggest challenges, delivering the benefits of democracy. And the other challenge to democracy at this point, and I will not mention anyone just to make sure I stress the importance enough, is crime. Crime has become the other problem in the Americas. When you look at the polls, there was a poll in Central America the other day. What are the bigger problems of your country today? 4 out of 5, the exception was Nicaragua, crime was the first problem. Number 2, poverty and employment economy. In Nicaragua, it was the other way. Strangely, in most countries, democracy, I would say that I won't say this about Nicaragua, but the other 4, democracy is not the problem, it's a given. But crime is the biggest problem. And we have to work on that because that's also a major threat to democratic rule. There are other problems, of course. We have to deal with corruption. We have to deal with with improving the quality of government, etc. But if I had to choose 2 challenges or 3 challenges, those are the 3 challenges. First, to keep the hemisphere in a condition of democratic dialogue and continue working among themselves in spite of all our problems or all our difficulties. And second, the big issue of poverty, which continues. Poverty and inequality. It was fashionable to say about a decade ago that poverty and inequality were different things. They were different matters. No. The fact of the issue of too many poor in Latin America has to do with 2% of the population of the region owning about 50% of the region output. That's what creates a lot of poor people in the region too. And so poverty is poverty and inequality is the issue, and crime. Those are the 3 challenges for, and I would say, our major issues for the Americas. Of course, I could mention others. I think, for example, for the OAS, we have a lot of hemispheric issues, properly hemispheric issues. Migration is one of them. Climate change is another one. We have several of these challenges, and those are the ones embedded in our program. But if I had to mention the 3 foremost, the governance, poverty, and crime. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
It's my turn, I guess. Let me see, as I look around the room here, there are a few people, I think, that have been watching the OAS longer than I have, but not a whole lot of people here. Basically, I can't really remember a time, or at least any extended period of time, when the OAS was really highly praised, that people, over dinner parties or conferences were saying, gee, didn't the OAS do a terrific job in solving these three problems in the past couple of years? In other words, there really isn't sort of a history of great accomplishments. There are some, and Jose Miguel referred to a few of them during the past year, but I remember even our reports back in the 80s and 90s of the dialogue, we occasionally referred to the Organization of American States. And I remember Saul Linowitz, who was a U.S. representative to the organization, inserted a line saying something to the effect that the OAS was irrelevant, forgotten, overlooked. I think those were the three adjectives he used. And here was someone that had a great deal of commitment to multilateralism. Let me go on, though. And most of the time over the years, like the quote I just said from Linowitz, there was a sense that the problem was with the organization, the way it was sort of structured internally, its budgets, etc. Jose Miguel now, I get the sense that the criticism is really directed much more. Cindy mentioned this in her opening, to you personally, to the leadership of the organization, not to the organization. And, you know, I know that because I've tried to defend you on occasion, so I know well. And I don't think the criticism is that you can override what the countries want or somehow resolve the tensions among the countries, but somehow that you haven't used the powers you do have enough. In other words, the power of voice, the power of persuasion, the power of gathering people together, of mobilizing, and particularly, it's not, you listed a long list of challenges for the OAS, but particularly on the issue of democracy, and particularly in the ALBA countries, if you like, that you really haven't sort of pursued that with the vigor and energy that we all know characterizes you. And I guess my question is, from someone very sympathetic, is do you sort of look back and regret that you didn't take up some of the challenges more than you did?
Hold off. I think we're going to take the questions in turn.
Questions one by one. Okay. Well, I like Peter's question, so I'll associate myself with that one and try to build on it a little bit. I've looked at the OAS from the point of view of democracy and looking at it compared to other regional organizations and the role of the UN. And the OAS really has a good story to tell in many ways, and has even played a role in sharing some of its experiences with the African Union and others. And so there's a lot of positive to say. But I think lately there have been more questions raised, and I think it was really around the combination of the Cuba issue and whether it's readmitted into the OAS and the Honduras issue. And I think your pinpointing of the question of how do you reconcile the non-intervention aspects of the OAS Charter with the Inter-American Democratic Charter, and let's not forget the other key instruments like the American Convention on Human Rights. These more recent documents, which were adopted by consensus, I think now inform the non-intervention principle. I mean, there are some fundamental new principles that the governments have agreed to, including the right to democracy. And so to fall back all the time on the non-intervention principle is in a way to ignore these new, in some ways cutting edge ideas that the OAS governments have accepted. So I guess my question is, isn't it time, or how would you creatively play a role in your diplomacy as the kind of chief diplomat of the Americas in finding creative solutions, even when you're coming at a time when there's a real lack of consensus within the member states? The OAS is an organization of member states. When they don't agree, it makes it very difficult to act. So that's in a way, gives you a special opportunity and role to try to bridge those differences. Maybe you need Superman. I mean, maybe no one could possibly do that. But what are some creative new ways you might do that? And I'm thinking in particular about the role of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, which is a very special and I think well-regarded component of the system, and what role they could play as a early warning mechanism for understanding what exactly is happening in terms of democratic standards in specific countries, which will help lay the groundwork for then what the OAS should do about it.
Thank you very much. As perhaps the only person on the panel who actually worked in the OAS, I have a lot of respect for the difficulties and challenges of meeting many of the mandates that are handed out by the member states, oftentimes unfunded mandates that make the summit initiatives and a lot of the work of the OAS more complex, and also the fact that there is a great deal of the work of the OAS that does go unnoticed, that is done at a working level that is really quite important. Referring to the questions others have mentioned about the work of support for democracy in the region and going beyond electoral observation and elections themselves and looking at the improvements in the institutions and the quality of democracy in the region, which is a difficult topic to approach. But the Secretary General mentioned the problem with crime, issues such as administration of justice, legal reform, police reform, improved legislatures, strengthening civil society, political parties. I'd like to ask the Secretary General what his impression is looking forward into his second term as Secretary General, what the outlook is for the work of the OAS in strengthening these key democratic institutions in the region. What role can the OAS be expected to play?
Shall I? Okay. Well, I think that maybe I'll try to take them all as a whole, but I will answer the three of them, the ones that our three friends have put here. I would say to start for the problem of non-intervention, probably no country or no situation exemplifies better the limits of collective action than Honduras. It's strange because here the accusation seems to be you never acted in this country and instead you acted on this one. I'll answer that, by the way. But in Honduras we tried everything save the gunboats and the blockade. And since nobody wants an embargo, because we don't want any more embargoes, we've already had one for too long, and nobody wanted the gunboats, we had to use all the other tools. So we used first suspension, isolation. We still, by the way, those who say that Honduras hasn't suffered by this should go to Honduras. Honduras has certainly undergone difficult problems, economic problems. It's still not getting money from any international organization except for the release of some money that was already owed to Honduras before the military coup. In the case of Honduras, there was a unity in the Americas. Everybody was in agreement. Nobody hesitated to call this a coup d'etat. The countries were willing to suspend Honduras immediately. They would have done it before if somebody didn't have thought that maybe we should make what's last thing to go to the one effort. And then we used, as I say, diplomacy. We went with a lot of people there. We went twice with the ministers. We used special missions, etc. And the regime was there. That's bad for the OAS, no, it's bad for multilateralism. But then there's Iran doing the same thing they were doing 3 years ago, and the UN Security Council has not been able to stop them doing that. And I'm not going to talk about Iran, which is, after all, a large country. Let's talk about North Korea. They still throw those rockets, which I don't know if they're really effective, but they are really working at it. Those are the limits of multilateralism. Intervention is not possible anymore. So when you ask me what else should we have done, no, impossible. Nothing else to do. We did everything we could do. We tried everything we do. We are still working with Honduras, and the effects of this is that we still don't have an agreement in the continent as to recognize Honduras or not. So when we talk about non-intervention, we are talking about something that at some point in our history was a very relevant concept. It still is, because many countries think that they have to stop intervention. I don't think intervention is possible anymore in Latin America. I don't think that any country, not even the U.S., could intervene in the old-fashioned way in a region of the Americas. So if that is true, what's the point of paying a price for it? If intervention is not possible, what's the point of paying a price for it? Why not try to engage? Why not try to discuss? Why not try to see if dialogue works where another solution will not work? Of course, we could have probably a big battle about Venezuela or Nicaragua, and probably would even force one of them out of the organization. I don't think that's a good thing to do. I think that in spite of everything, the role of the OAS, I'm not saying the role of everyone, the role of the OAS is to keep those countries in the organization and try to work with them. And I try very hard to work with them, and I will continue trying. And I will try to be there to observe the elections in Venezuela in September, and hopefully that will be possible. If it's not possible, I'll keep trying. We are trying very hard also, not only also in Nicaragua and in several other countries. We're going to observe the elections in Colombia, etc. We go wherever we can, because we think that the only way we can promote democracy today is by and be relevant about it by keeping the unity of the organization. And the members of the council that are here know that many are suspicious of us. But we were there when the Bolivian Constitution was signed. And we have been invited to every event in the region. Some we go, to some others we don't go. And the OAS is not like there's even a story about somebody said I went to a meeting of the most traditional left in Latin America, and they mentioned the OAS and nobody booed. Well, that was something that in my time, and when I was young, was a member of the centrist party. I became a socialist later. In my time, in a meeting of the Christian Democratic Party, you talked about the OAS, and everybody would boo. And made the OAS a part of the hemisphere with all the problems, and I think that has a value. They admit that we exist and that we can play some roles, and that did not happen a couple of decades ago only. So, and I think that that's what we have to do. What do we have to do? We are working we're offering our services to the governments of Bolivia, of Ecuador, of Nicaragua, of Honduras, of every other place to improve the quality of the states. We are working with some of these countries we have mentioned in improving the quality of the democratic system. We are offering aid to the countries to run their elections, the case of Haiti, or to improve the electoral systems. We had the minister of Bolivia a few weeks ago reporting on their progress made on their fight against corruption. It's a long way, but it's the only one possible. The other ones are not possible. I remember some very important U.S. congressman. I had a conversation once about 4 years ago where he said, we have to be able to join forces with our friends from Chile, from Brazil, from Colombia, from Mexico, to confront these problems. And I told I felt it because he was a very, very nice, very decent person. I said, look, why don't you ask your friends from Brazil, from Chile, from Colombia, and from Mexico if they want to do that? They don't want to do it. Maybe one of them would like the Secretary General of the OAS to do it. But they would do it. The other day we had a meeting in Buenos Aires of the UNASUR. The big issue was Honduras. And from what I've heard, only two countries defended the notion of reincorporating Honduras into the Organization of American States. The others still have to be won, and I am talking about some countries which are not qualified as left-wing countries. On the contrary. So that's the reality you are faced with. Why did we suspend? What the difference between Honduras and Cuba? Well, Cuba was suspended because of the the TIAR, the Tratado Interamericano de Asistencia Recíproca. It was suspended for being Marxist-Leninist, for being a member of the Sino-Soviet Axis, and for being, therefore, a threat to the security of the region. The Assembly estimated, from my point of view, 20 years late, that Cuba was not a threat to the region and not a member of the Sino-Soviet Axis. Probably they still say that they are Marxist-Leninists, but we know that that's obsolete, completely obsolete. That was for Cuba. So we told Cuba, you are not suspended, but if you want to come back to the organization, you have to abide by the same rules that everybody does. And strangely enough, we have now, fortunately, we have now a democratic charter, a convention on corruption, a Inter-American Convention on Human Rights, etc. Why don't we talk about those things? Come to the OAS and we'll talk about those things. We'll have a dialogue on those things. They have not come. They have not come. I don't think they will come until there's a change in Cuba. But that's the Cuban case. On the case of Honduras, no, they violated a very important instrument of the OAS, which is the Inter-American Democratic Charter. While being an active member of the organization, which Cuba is not, they overthrew their government. They took the president from their home and threw him out of the country in contravention of the Honduran Constitution, which says that no Honduran can be exiled, and he still is, by the way. In spite of the fact that President Lobo has said that he can come back whenever he wants, and that's very important to recognize. So we suspended Honduras on what grounds? On the grounds of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, which is a standing document of the organization. Why don't we suspend Cuba on those grounds? Because they have never come to discuss the possibility of rejoining the organization, and I'm really sure that most of the world would think that us discussing a suspension of Cuba without Cuba ever having uttered the word to say that they want to come back to the organization would be really a little bit superficial. So that's the story of Cuba and Honduras. There are different conventions, different reasons, different countries, and different situations. And to both we have applied exactly the same rules. If Cuba wants to come back to the OAS, it will have to face the Inter-American Democratic Charter, of course. That's exactly what was done with those. Now, there's finally one thing that I have to answer. Well, Peter asked me a personal question. I will answer it personally. You see, a dear friend, a very influential person of this country, told a friend of mine, we like him. I mean, he's good. I mean, we know he's in favor of democracy. We know he's in favor of democracy. It's something that we would that we would very much like to work with. But he's not like our guy. He's not like our guy. I mean, we would like to feel that he really is associated with us. Well, I admit that. I've been working with the U.S. for the past 40 years, 30 years. I even ran a U.S. Studies Institute. But I have I would say, I don't know, a Latin American point of view. I mean, the problem sometimes with the scholars in this country is that they talk to those Latin Americans who already think like them. And we have to deal with other Latin Americans. We have to deal with Latin Americans who still believe the things about imperialism that were said about 50 years ago. They exist. We have to deal with presidents who will make speeches of that in this country will be 30 or 40 years obsolete, but they are the presidents of Latin America. We have to deal with people who have made a lifetime of fighting against what they call a formal democracy and talking about the need to carry out revolutions, things like that. And we have to deal with all kinds of Latin Americans and try to include them all in the organization. And I truly believe that that is what's convenient for the United States of America also. The moment we have a monocolored organization, the moment we have everybody in the OAS more or less exactly on the same lines, is the moment this organization is worthless. Because that's not the truth about the Americas. That's not the truth of the Americas. The truth of the Americas is in the OAS in the sense that everybody is there. Everybody is there. And they speak their mind if you look at the assembly. So I think that that would be my answer, Peter. I'm very much for you. I'm very much your guy because I want the organization to remain relevant, and it will remain relevant as much as it is able to represent everyone in the Americas.
Thank you, Jose.
Sorry, I took a long time. I won't take too much next time, I promise.
Take as much as we thought you would take. Thanks very, very much. We're going to open it up to your comments, questions. Feel free to make a comment or a question. But try to keep it as brief as possible and tell us who you are before you speak. I knew there'd be somebody. Baz.
Two journalists among.
Hi, James Bosworth. I'm a freelance writer. You at one point said that the unity of the organization is the most important thing. And I have to ask, and it's a hard question for the Secretary General, is there an issue, is there a principle you would be willing to break the organization over? Is there a point, if someone threatened to leave, you would say, okay, goodbye, because the issue is that important? Or is unity the ultimate goal?
Well, I would say that I very much stand by what I have said about the Inter-American Democratic Charter. If there was a massive fraud in an election, and that would not be, and the country would pretend countries would pretend that never happened. If there was a massive violation of human rights, or some very serious breach of democracy in that sense, I would certainly, if some country closed, did something like Fujimori did, close the Congress and elect one of its own, I would certainly expect the organization to do something, and I would say that. But I don't think that, I know that there are some countries in which some things have happened, but I have to look at the possibility. I have to look at the possibility of those things being overturned by democracy, by democratic elections. I'm more concerned about having clean elections this year in several countries, because those are the ways of democratic change, the possible ways of democratic change today. If I see there is absolutely no way, no possible way of democratic change, I would say so, of course. I'm Eduardo Feller. I'm formerly from the National Science Foundation.
Hold on one sec. Wait for the microphone.
Thank you. I'm Eduardo Feller, formerly from the National Science Foundation, and since no one was raising their hand, I decided to raise the hand on a suggestion that has been discussed at the City University of New York at the Center of Graduate Studies, and the person who's been pushing this thought is Ronald Hellman, who I think is known to you. And he suggests a proposal to form a new commission on inter-American geo-regional conflict resolution. Since today, when we see this problem in the Gulf of Mexico, there is obviously no means for the countries that are affected to try to set out policy that is science-based rather than science which is policy-based. And your thoughts about this?
Well, I would say that there are several areas in which there is some degree of supranationality, and it's in some other areas it's hard. You have a certain degree of supranationality in matters of human rights. I'm not talking necessarily about the commissions. I don't think that I think that our Commission on Human Rights is a little bit more supranational than the Council of Human Rights of the United Nations, which is strictly multilateral. But it does exist. I mean, the Convention Against Torture is really applied in several countries and all that. And I think that maybe the issues of the environment and of natural catastrophe, I mean, not natural, man-created catastrophes such as what's going on, might be, we might have faith that some degree of supranationality can be created. In issues of governance or of democracy, that's very difficult. Let me just tell you one thing. When I signed I didn't sign. I didn't have a chance to put my own signature, but I was there. I was a minister, a vice president of Chile when we signed the treaty with the European Union. It was a trade. I mean, we were interested in the trade, frankly. We were interested in the trade. But it also had some political clauses, some things so innocent as having a political dialogue every year, and all of us abiding by a democratic clause. Those are the kind of... When I asked how long will it take to ratify it, the answer from the European Union was, well, all the economic part, the free trade, freedom of investment, rules of origin, etc., all those terrible things, that has to be approved by the European Parliament. The political part has to be approved by each country of the European Union before being enforced. And I said, but the political part is just a statement. It's not really relevant. Well, no, but no country of the European Union had given away until very few months ago its political prerogatives. So we live in a world of, politically, we live in a global world formed of sovereign states. And that's a limit unless somebody comes up and changes it, but I don't see it changing anyway.
Go ahead in the back.
Thanks. Sergio Gomez from El Tiempo of Colombia. As you know, there's going to be elections in 3 weeks in Colombia, and one of the themes that keep coming up in the campaign is the foreign intervention in the political process, especially that of President Hugo Chavez of Venezuela, who has even threatened to stop all comers if certain candidate wins. So I would like to have your thoughts on that, please.
Well, I've said it several times. I said it before in the first year of my mandate, my second year of mandate. I've always said I don't like people authorities from one country talk about the elections in another one. That's definitely. I think it's not a good practice to have rulers of one country presenting their options and their opinions
on other countries. I think I'm not calling that necessarily intervention in the sense that, but it's a bad practice. It's a practice that shouldn't happen. Does it have any effect? I don't really think it does. It has any effect. Actually, many countries, many observers in a few years ago felt that those kind of comments actually favored the candidate who was attacked. I'm not really sure if this is the case, but I'm certain that in Colombia, the issues that are being presented to the people are so important that nobody is going to be influenced by those comments, which I repeat, I don't like.
Hold on.
Mr. Secretary, of the many criticisms that you unfortunately hear periodically, one hears that the OAS is often criticized as an old boys club, a club of executives, presidents, foreign ministers, everybody knows each other, the abrazo, and it's not a 21st century organization that reflects the diversity of this wonderful hemisphere. Other organizations, legislatures, for example, NGOs. Thank goodness you don't have tea parties, but other elements. How do you respond to that criticism?
Well, how do you make the OAS more like the U.S. Senate, for example?
Well, actually, with a very, very sincere yes. The Organization of American States, Organization of American States, which in all international organizations means organization of governments. There are no, I mean, I remember, I read two things in these years that have made me laugh. One was said, Mr. Insulza has been elected as Secretary General, and he has to make a choice between going with the peoples or going with the governments. Well, I have no choice in that. I have to go with the governments. Those are the ones who elected me. That's a fact. I would love to represent the peoples, but that's not the fact that the OAS, even though I do assign more importance to that sentence, I mean, than the author of that sentence, to the representative democracy. I think that the representative governments do represent the peoples, but I am elected by representative governments. Even in spite of that fact, let us remember that the OAS is the organization that pays more attention to the NGOs and organized civil society. I started the dialogue with NGOs at the Summit of the Americas in Santiago, Chile, almost by accident, because they went there and they wanted to be received, and we received them. And it's going on ever since, and several hundred organizations are affiliated, associated to the OAS, but the OAS continues to be an organization of governments. That's true. And the other one that was really funny was an editorial in a newspaper of the region that says the students are bolder than the OAS, fortunately. I mean, the students, the day the OAS was bolder than the student, it was had more audacity than the university students of that country. That would be a very bad moment, because I think that international organizations in this world of sovereign states are not there to light the fires; they are to put them out. We are firemen, not fire. We are not fighters. We are firefighters, not real fighters in terms of war and conflict.
Can I ask one other question? I've just been thinking about this. You talked about Cuba and suggested that the next step is up to Cuba to take. And I wonder if there aren't some initiatives that the OAS or some of its member states might take, and that it shouldn't be described as Cuba being in the organization or outside. Isn't there a way to bring it into some of the activities on a preliminary basis, like disasters, etc. Is there any thought about what the OAS might be doing? Because you do have Cuba in an anomalous position still.
Yeah, well, I would say that I must admit that the fact that there has been done some afterwards discussion on Cuba was saddening for me, because I always said that I would like to resolve the problem of Cuba at the OAS unanimously, that it wouldn't be a divisive issue. And it wasn't. Everybody stood up and applauded and said that we agreed on that. But then there was a lot of criticism, and why did you do that with Cuba, etc., etc. What I want to say is that I wouldn't take any other steps on Cuba that were not consented by every member of the Organization of American States. If not, they wouldn't be helpful. They wouldn't do the job. Of course, I would like to have initiatives in which we could invite Cuba, and I hope Cuba could come. But I wouldn't do that if every member of the organization does not agree.
Go ahead.
My name is Patricio from I'm a senior analyst at the Center for Democracy in the Americas. I would like to disagree because I think the OAS is extremely relevant. It's a shame that not everybody can go to an electoral mission to the region when you see that from the government to the last farmer or poor neighborhood, everybody knows the OAS and there is a respect, and they are very happy that the person with the OAS the OAS name is around taking care of the country, taking care of democracy. So the OAS is extremely important for the continent. Maybe in the US, actually, we have this double standard, and just a comment, I would say that the opposition that the OAS and the Secretary General faces here is maybe based on a very particular partial view of what the OAS is doing in terms of a very specific group of countries. We can tell that that's the main reason that you are being criticized. The problem with that, though, is you want to create a very healthy reform movement inside the OAS. You need to deal with the fact that reform request is coming from a specific group of people for a specific group of countries. So it's very difficult to deal with that. And then that specific group of countries, etc., are asking you for reforms also. So my question is how you deal with those double requests about changes that the OAS needs for the future, or if those changes are really necessary.
Well, I proposed the other day, not changes, but I did say which were our limitations. One limitation is that we don't have a clear definition on which are major breakdowns of democracy. I mentioned a couple of them in response to a question a moment ago, but they are not defined anywhere. I said also that that the access to the charter of the democratic charter was a problem, because only the governments could ask action in grounds of the democratic charter. Maybe we should open that. And a couple more, never mind. What I want to say is that if they said which of these would be the most important for you, I would say to be able to go to any country of the region without having a previous invitation from the government. That's not in my proposals. It would just be rational. Let me tell you that from that point of view, the democratic charter is to a certain extent an obstacle. If I tell a country, like all the foreign ministers say, so I would like to visit you tomorrow, would that be possible? He will certainly say yes. Or maybe say, well, I'm not going to be here tomorrow, but how about next week? If I tell him I would like to visit you on the grounds of Article 20 of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, he will probably say, no, forget it. We don't want you here. So if I had to, I'm convinced, maybe because I'm too optimistic, I've always been optimistic, I feel that if we had been able to have a real mission in Honduras, we had some people there, I must admit that, and probably they were not, they were not as conscious of what was going on as we would have hoped them to be. But if I had if we had been able to be in Honduras with a mission before the crisis, maybe we could have averted that crisis. And in several countries, I think that if we were able to be there before, we would be very helpful. But unfortunately, both us, and somebody mentioned the Commission on Human Rights, and I'm sorry I forgot to refer to that, but both us and the Commission on Human Rights have to be invited. The Commission has a little bit of advantage towards us because it has some blank invitations. Some countries have invited the Commission on Human Rights permanently. They have told them that they can go wherever they want. We don't have that through the Inter-American Democratic Charter. We have to be called by the countries or be authorized by the countries. So many questions.
Sure. I have a question about the limits of OAS action with respect to elections. You've rightly pointed to the importance of fair and democratic elections as ways of people changing governments. I have a specific question about Honduras and also one about Venezuela. What do you do, or how does the OAS respond to a request for electoral monitoring when the existing electoral apparatus itself is not set up in a way that would allow for a free and fair election? In other words, when there's a high degree of politicization of the basic infrastructure of an electoral process. And second, what are the range of measures, including condemnation, resolutions, whatever, that the OAS can take as a response to situations such as the one that materialized in Nicaragua in the legislative elections, when there are clear allegations of fraud and it is alleged that the OAS as an institution did not act forcefully enough? What are the specific kinds of things you can do, and how do you deal with a situation in which you are going to monitor the day in which a vote is taken, but not necessarily the kinds of institutional frameworks that are set up that govern the election?
Yeah, well, thank you. First, I remember the case of Nicaragua. Those were the municipal, the local elections when Mr. Montealegre especially was a candidate in Managua and all that. Well, actually, we were not invited for those elections, so we couldn't go and observe them. I just said, well, hopefully we would be able to go to Nicaragua, because I'm concerned about the fact that we cannot say anything about those elections because we were not invited. That's all I said, and you should read what the answer was, not only what the answer was from the Nicaraguan authorities, but what the non-answer was of the other countries of the region. I did get the solidarity of all the members of the OAS because of the insults that have been thrown at me. Like I was an interventionist. I was allied with the CIA and the European Union. That was funny. To violate the I was attacked because I had violated the independence and sovereignty of Nicaragua. Everything I could say. I had a lot of support, personal support from the council, but nobody asked me to proceed in the matter of Nicaragua. Mm-hmm. So I would tell them that. When there was when there was election in Mexico, somebody also asked me to give an opinion, and I said exactly the same. I will refrain from giving an opinion because we were not invited to observe those elections. But then, 2 months later, I would say the system, the electoral tribunal has proclaimed the president, and we have to accept that. That's what but we don't
give verdicts on elections to which we are not invited. To the second one, I think that Venezuela has a very technically correct electoral system. When we have asked for, when we have had a chance to verify the machines of the OAS, of the Venezuelan elections, even though they have been criticized several times, we didn't find anything wrong with them. I must remind you that we observed the elections, the legislative elections 5 years ago, the election of the re-election of President Chavez, and the first referendum in which Mr. Chavez lost, and we had nothing to say about the procedures of the system except some very simple things. Of course, we would love to observe the elections in Venezuela. By the end of the year, we would like to observe the congressional elections, because I think that they are politically very relevant, that they will be very important for the region as a whole, and because by being there we could say and give an opinion on them. But if we are not invited, we'll do the same as we do with I'll mention the ones that don't invite us, usually Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, and Brazil. So I'll say the same thing that I say in those 4 cases, which are the only 4, and one country in the Caribbean, I think, one that does not invite us, because they are not used to inviting anybody. I have no choice by that. I cannot say anything of the elections in Venezuela if I'm not able to fill the mission there.
We have a number of questions.
I don't mind.
Oh, well, I was told that I'm going to take 2 or 3 more questions of people that have been held their hands up for a while, and I'm going to have to excuse the others. You've been very patient. Tell us who you are.
My name is Irina Kimushkina. I'm a consultant on social and political issues with international organization. Secretary General, first, thank you for your presentation. I learned from previous question that OAS is an old boys club. I think it's not correct, because I would call it, I doubt it's old. We could discuss the term old and how old, but I will definitely call it a boys and girls club, because many women working in OAS and in the countries of Latin America and Caribbean region are really contributing a lot, and it's not affirmative action. In many cases, they are really working harder. My question is about women issue in the region. This year was announced by Inter-American Commission on Women as a year of women. And there are certain issues that the Commission is working on. It's more active political participation of women in the region, in all levels, in local governments.
Excuse me, can I ask you to...
Yeah, okay. So my question is, the other problem is women facing crisis. So my question is, how realistically is the issue? What kind of results can we wait with this year of the women? What you expect to have as an improvement?
The gentleman right behind you.
Hi, Alejandro Veche from Partners for Democratic Change. My question is, taking into consideration what you've described in what happened in Honduras or the case of Nicaragua, so we don't hit a wall in the future, and knowing the limitations of Article 20 and so forth of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, what can we do then so that when there are clear or allegations of fraud and corruption within the executive powers, what can we do so that civil society or other powers within government can actually ask for missions and ask for the OAS to intervene and be a relevant party to intervene and help out in these situations? I don't know if it's more conflict resolution mechanisms or what. But thanks.
I think we got that. One more. This young lady here, Carolyn.
Must have this name tag on. My name's Carolyn Rose Avila. I'm with one of the international NGOs and wanted to know the role that the OAS is playing with Haiti, especially within the context of the region, and many times crises offer opportunities that might not have been there before, and I think I can envision a very active OAS role in helping Haiti become much more integrated into the region, and also actually working with their election process at this time. Thank you.
Okay. First, on women, well, I think that the main problem of the Organization of American States in this and other matters, because I did in my programmatic speech at the OAS, I did mention women as the fifth point that we wanted to deal with, is that a matter of resources. We have been strongly supporting our verification processes in one area, which is violence against women. I would very much like to include into that also the issues of equality of in work and equality of pay for women. I think that's basic for the development to fight discrimination against women. I mean, discrimination against women probably the best way to describe discrimination against women in the region is the fact that that there's a large majority of monoparental families headed by a woman, which are poor. The percentage is much higher than the percentage of poverty in the region at large. So I would try to at least end the year with a larger program on matters of women affairs. I don't think that we should deal only, even though it's a big problem and it's getting bigger, it's not only violence against women, there are also other issues that we should include in our program. And we finish the year with a program of action which is more comprehensive. I will be very satisfied for that. On the issue of what happens, well, I was referring to two different situations. If there's a massive fraud in an election and it's denounced universally and everybody is fighting and that, even if we have not observed the election, probably would have to act, as you say, as trying to exercise our capacities in conflict resolution or try to get the council to apply the democratic charter. But what we cannot do, our limitation is that we cannot observe an election if we are not invited. And by observing an election, I mean not this. We have a lot of observers. They're usually the ones who appear on the papers on the night of the election because they just go there, they sit around the place where the votes are being counted, and they begin commenting them before the election is over. But I'm talking about observation missions of the size of the OAS. Only the European Union has had in Latin America, and even we have more than them. We observed the presidential elections in Nicaragua with 200 people. We observed the elections in Bolivia with over 150 observers. They are in the field, they are in the designed places, they have a cost questionnaire that they have to fill. They have to report every suspicious activity they see, and we report of all that to council. That's what I'm talking about, observing elections. Now, if we can't do that and that's what some of you was mentioning as the OAS. I think Patricio was back there, was mentioning as the role of the OAS in this matter. If we don't have that observation, we cannot give a verdict on the elections. But that doesn't mean that in the crisis side we cannot act if there's a visible
clear massive fraud in our election. That's another thing. And finally, Haiti. I think that we have two roles in Haiti. There's too much of a crowd in Haiti, so we want to have some kind of a definition. One role, to start by the second, we are doing three things in Haiti basically. We do have other programs in the social area, basically throughout the Inter-American Democratic Foundation. We have been there on the emergency. We have taken food, all that. But in the reconstruction area, we have three areas. Which one is the electoral system. We are the main support for the Electoral Commission of Haiti to organize the elections, and we are faced now with a problem. Is that we have not observed elections in Haiti because we helped them run the elections, and now there's a demand that we also have some kind of an observation mission. I'm not really sure we can do both unless we find a way of separating completely our work in running the election from our work in observing the election, and probably that would mean that we could. It's possible that we would have to limit our role in the counting of the votes, which we will probably not be compatible with the observation. Then we have the civil register, which is linked to the electoral thing in the sense that you see in the election of 2006, it was supposed to be 2005, but it ended up being at the beginning of 2006. There was no electoral register. I mean, there was a register from 93, which included several Madeleine Albrights and some Saddam Husseins in the list. Because Haitians, since they don't have an identity system, they tend to register whatever name that they want to put there. And there was absolutely no verification on that. So we developed an electoral system, an electoral register, which incredibly, I don't know how that happened, because when I visited, when my ultimatum, the ultimatum I gave to my people there was, look, we have only a few months to go, and you have registered 100,000. But things began rolling, and we got to 3.55 million people registered. That was the heaviest number in the history of Haiti. And we kept on going with the electoral system to transform it into a civil register. And now I would say before the earthquake we had 90% of the Haitians over 18 years old as registered in the civil register, were registered with their identity cards. At this moment, we are trying to recover the cards of many people that lost them, and to be able to use them in the elections also, and also to identify with some very incomplete registers of the people who died, because as you know, many people were just thrown into a common grave. But we're working on that. But our main challenge today in the civil register is the children, birth registration. Because there's no point in having a register of people at 18 if you don't have nothing from 0 to 18. And we are working very strongly on that and trying to work with the of course, all this is with the government of Haiti, that's definitely so, with the ONI, the Office National de Identification. And the third one is a little bit more ambitious. We are running that, but we're trying to turn it into a public private operation, which is the cadastre. Nobody wants to invest in Haiti because they don't know who owns the land in which they're going to invest. So we're starting a cadastre project with companies that dedicate themselves to that. What do they gain? Well, they keep the register, of course, so they can give advice to a lot of people who want to buy land, or etc. But we are going to provide the government of Haiti with, I wouldn't say a full cadastre, but something like a cadastre. That's our role, and we're going to play that role. And we are members of the council that we don't have a vote, but we have members of this council that has been created for running things. But let me tell you that I'm still a little bit concerned about the whole operation of reconstruction of Haiti. Even though everybody is a member of the council and everybody has promised that this time we're going to have just one program for the reconstruction of Haiti, I'm looking forward to see that. I'm looking forward to see that. I think that the big problem of Haiti has not been money, it has been organization and coordination among all the actors. And I trust very much that this committee that has been created with former President Clinton and Prime Minister Belarive will be able to. I mean, it's not that hard. It's not trying to get together 10,000 NGOs that exist in Haiti. It's getting together the 6 or 7 large donors, which are basically the U.S., Canada, European Union, Brazil. Brazil is donating today $55 million to Haiti in a ceremony in the World Bank. The World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, the International Monetary Fund. Those are the main actors. If those actors get together, the rest will have to follow suit because they are not large enough to play a role on their own.
There's probably no more forward-looking issue that we could end on than the question of Haiti. I want to thank the Secretary General for his honesty and forthcomingness. Thank the co-sponsors, the Inter-American Dialogue, Brookings, and CSIS. Thank all of you for your attention. Please join me in thanking José Miguel Insulza.
Thank you very much.